this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to use a really long crochet hook like this to do something called Tunisian crochet. Tunisian crochet creates a fabric that looks like this, and it's a cross between crochet and knitting. Although you don't necessarily need to already know crochet to do Tunisian crochet, I do recommend you at least know how to make a crochet chain. If you've never crocheted at all before, I'll link my crochet for absolute beginners up in this corner here, so I recommend learning how to do a chain in that tutorial, then coming back to learn Tunisian crochet. So for Tunisian crochet, we need a particularly long crochet hook. You can buy a specific crochet hook for this purpose. They're usually labelled as Tunisian or Afghan hooks in craft shops. You can get ones with a hook on each end like this one. You can get ones with a hook on one end and a stopper on the end like this one. You can also get ones that have a shorter part for the hook, but they have a cable attached to them like this to hold your stitches. You can use any one of those types of crochet hooks for this tutorial. However, there is one thing you need to know. In crochet, we usually go by the hook size that's recommended on the yarn label. However, for Tunisian crochet, we need our loops to be super loose because the fabric it creates is very dense and it likes to curl up on itself. So we need to increase our hook size by approximately 3mm. So for example, I'm going to be using a DK weight yarn in this tutorial, and on the label it tells me to use a 4mm crochet hook. However, I'm going to up that to a 7mm crochet hook so that I get a nice flat piece of crochet. So let's get learning Tunisian crochet. Start by making a slip knot using your preferred method. This is how I like to make my slip knots. And then your starting chain can be any number of chains. So for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to aim for about 10 or 12, but it really doesn't matter at this point. So I've gone ahead and made a chain of 12. So the first row of pretty much every Tunisian crochet pattern starts with something called a foundation row. So that's what we're going to learn first. So what we're essentially going to be doing on the foundation row is we're going to be picking up a loop in each chain across. And when we work into the chains, just like when we work into chains in crochet, you can work into it in a few different places. Many people go into the front and pick up a loop there, or they turn the chain over and go into the back bump of the chain. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to take the easy way and go straight into the chain to pick up the back loop there. So we're going to skip this first chain here and put our hook into the second chain from the hook, and I'm going to go under just one loop here. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. I'm going to do this in each chain across. I'm going to put my hook into the next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. I just want to show you how loose my tension is here. It's not tight at all. My hook is moving freely in those loops. So I'm going to put my hook into the next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. Hook into the next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. So repeat that all the way across to the end of your chain and I'll meet you there. So I've gone ahead and continued picking up a loop in each chain across, and the number of loops on your hook now should be exactly the same as the number of chains you made to begin with. So what we've just done here is actually half of the foundation row. In Tunisian crochet we actually work each row twice. We work in this direction picking up loops, that's called a forward pass, and then we work backwards in this direction casting off those loops, and that's called a return pass. So what we've done here is the forward pass of the foundation row. So let's do the return pass, and for most crochet stitches the return pass is actually the same as what I'm going to show you for pretty much every row. So yarn over and pull through one loop, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through two loops. So yarn over, pull through two. And we're going to repeat that yarn over, pull through two until we have one loop left on our hook. So yarn over, pull through two, 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 yarn over, pull through two. Continue repeating that until you have one loop left on your hook, and I'll meet you there. So that's our first row of Tunisian crochet completed. We did a forward pass and the return pass. So this foundation row is pretty much the same for most Tunisian stitches. We're going to learn a stitch called Tunisian simple stitch today. It's the most common one that beginners start with. So to work our first row of Tunisian simple stitch, I'm going to have a look at our crochet and we're going to identify the vertical bars. So the vertical bars are these lengths of yarn here that are going vertically down our row of crochet. And our first vertical bar is here at the edge of our work. We're not going to be picking up this vertical bar here. What I'm going to do is underneath this second vertical bar here, I'm going to put my hook. So I'm putting my hook in underneath that vertical bar like that. Then yarn over and pull up a loop. And we're going to repeat that all the way along, and then we're going to stop just before we do our final loop. So I'm going to put my hook underneath the next vertical bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. Hook underneath the next vertical bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. So continue repeating that all the way along until you have one vertical bar left unworked, and I'll meet you there. So I've continued working my forward pass, picking up those vertical bars. And then I've got one vertical bar just here right at the edge of my work that I've not picked up just yet. For this last pickup, we're actually going to put our hook in a slightly different place, and this gives us a really lovely neat edge. I'll just show you the kind of edge that it gives us on my swatch here. So if you can see this lovely edge here, that's what we're going to be doing by doing this loop slightly different. So instead of putting our hook just under the vertical bar, we're actually going to put it under two loops here. So if I pull this out a little bit, you can see that there's another loop tucked here behind the vertical bar. So I'm actually putting my hook straight through underneath two loops here. And that's what gives us the nice edge. So I'm going to yarn over and pull that yarn over through both of those loops like that. So that's the forward pass of Tunisian simple stitch done. This forward pass is the same for all future rows. Now yarn over and pull through one loop. We always start our return passes with pulling through one loop to help create that neat edge. Now yarn over and pull through two over and over again until the end of the row, just like we did with the foundation row. And continue doing this, and I'll meet you at the end of this row. So I've just finished that return pass of our first row of Tunisian simple stitch, and we're actually going to be repeating that row over and over again. If you would like to see that row again, you can use your YouTube settings to rewind, and if you need to, slow down this tutorial. So I recommend practicing Tunisian simple stitch for a few rows here, and then you need to come back to this tutorial because there is a way of finishing off our last row to give a neat edge. So I'll show you that next. So here's my little sample of crochet after I've done a few rows, and don't worry if your crochet is curling up on itself as well. Tunisian crochet likes to do this because there's a lot more bulk in the back here. You can see the back's quite lumpy compared to the front, but I promise you that with a good blocking it does lay nice and flat, and it has such a beautiful drape as well. If you've never blocked crochet before, I'll link my tutorial for that down in the description. It's quite straightforward. So if we have a look at my last row, we can kind of see it's quite holy and open, and it just doesn't have that neat of an edge. So we're going to do something called casting off, and in Tunisian crochet it's super duper easy. We're just going to slip stitch in each vertical bar across. So remember, we skipped this first vertical bar, and under the second vertical bar I'm just going to do a slip stitch, and again under the next vertical bar a slip stitch, and then I'm going to repeat this all the way across. And then for our last slip stitch we're going to do what we were doing before and put our hook under two loops there. So I'm going in just there to do that final slip stitch. And then I can go ahead and fasten off just like we would with crochet. So chain one, snip your yarn, and then use your crochet hook to pull that yarn tail through that end and give it a pull. And then I'll quickly show you how I like to weave my ends in on Tunisian crochet, because I know that's a bit of a pain point for beginners. So I'm going to turn my piece of crochet over looking at the back, and then I'm going to grab one of my yarn tails and thread it on a needle. Then for weaving in ends, if you've ever woven ends into garter stitch knitting before, that's the technique that I tend to use here, because we kind of have those purl bumps like we do in knitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a loop here, and then I'm going to move my needle across and pick up the next loop. Move across, pick up the next loop. Move across, pick up the next loop. I'm going to do that about an inch, maybe an inch and a half, 2 inches, depending on how big my swatch is and how slippy my yarn is. I'm going to pull that yarn through, and then I'm going to weave it back in the opposite direction. So I'm going to maybe go down one and pick up some of these loops along here to go back. And the same as crochet, I like to change directions twice, so I'm going back over that area 3 times. So I'm actually going to move back up to that first place where I sewed in that end and go back in that other direction. And that's just my preferred way of weaving ends into Tunisian crochet. Feel free to experiment and do what feels best for you. So that was how to crochet Tunisian simple stitch. This is the first video in a series I'm running on the channel, learning lots of Tunisian crochet techniques and stitches. I'll be adding them all to this playlist on your screen, so if you want to know what to do next, check out that playlist. And I'll see you again next week for our next Tunisian crochet tutorial.